Hello and welcome to this Read Spring 2021 information session for Read students and their families. As I said, we were waiting to see if more folks are coming in, so we'll continue to. Folks are still coming in, so we'll get started in just a second. But I just wanted to let folks know today's info session is being recorded so that we can share this information back out with the campus, with the community. So just to let you know if that. We'll be recording this for you to be able to review later as well. So I'm gonna just hold tight for just another moment while more folks are joining. All right, so before we begin, I would like to first start by acknowledging our veterans who have served and continue to serve our country. I think it's really important for us to acknowledge today. So thank you, thank you, thank you. My name is Carnell McConnell Black. I serve as the Vice President for Student Life here at the college, and I use he, him, his pronouns. And as you may be aware, Reed announced our plans for the spring term 2021 at the end of October, which included our modified academic calendar, plans for campus operations and events, all with an eye on our COVID-19 prevention and response plan. We knew that there could be lots of questions today from the Reed community, and so we're holding two of these information sessions to really talk in greater detail about our campus plans, what we've learned from our fall semester, and to answer your questions. So as I said, this session will be recorded and will be added to our resources for students and family members page for you to reference for the future. So to get us started, I would like to just share with you the format of today's session. And this session is being, again, held as a webinar, which means that the attendees are in listen mode right now, but you will have the ability to ask questions of the panel via the chat function. If you have questions that you would like to ask the panel, please type them again in that chat box in this Zoom session. We will address your questions through my asking of the questions to the panelists during the session. And also, we will probably also be responding to you privately as well in the chat. Or we will probably, if we don't have an answer for you, we'll be forwarding on the questions to the appropriate resources on campus and emailing you back. And that we'll be utilizing the email that you actually utilized to register for today. This session today was going to focus on academics, registering for classes, course formats, finals, thesis, and senior celebration. We're going to talk a little bit about COVID-19 guidelines for returning to campus in the spring, a bit around student engagement programming, how to plan for the summer, and a lot more. So we got 60 minutes here. We're going to try to get through quite a bit. But if we are unable to answer any of your questions, please know that we encourage you to email student-life@reed.edu and someone will get back to you. As I said, I'm moderating today and I'm joined by a number of my wonderful colleagues from around campus. And so I'm going to ask them to go ahead and introduce themselves. And we'll start with Alice.
Hey everybody, I'm Alice Hara. I'm the director of the Center for Life Beyond Reed, and I use she, her pronouns. Amy.
Hi, I'm Amy Shuckman. I use she and her pronouns. I'm the Associate Dean of Student and Campus Life, so I oversee residence life and student engagement. Britt.
Hi everyone, Britt Hoover. I am the Assistant Dean for Student Support. I oversee the Isolation and Quarantine Program and the Student Support Office and Care Team. Dana.
Hi, my name is Dana Katz, and I am a professor of art history and humanities here at Reed. Nora.
Good afternoon. I'm Nora McLaughlin, registrar at Reed, and I use she, her pronouns. Hugh, go for it.
Hi, Hugh Porter, Vice President for College Relations and Planning. I use he, his pronouns.
I'll jump in. I'm Julie Maxfield, Associate Dean of Students for Academic Life. I use she, her pronouns, and the areas I oversee are international student services, academic support, and disability and accessibility resources. Madison?
My name is Madison Reithman. I use she, her pronouns, and I am an epidemiologist and the COVID-19 response coordinator for READ.
All right, thank y'all for the quick introductions. So we're going to get started first with a focus on READ's response to the pandemic, which again has altered the way our regular mode of operations and also just changed the ways that we ourselves and you all are engaging in the world. So I'm going to invite our Vice President Hugh Porter, who co-chairs READ's COVID Risk Assessment Group, along with Madison, who's our new COVID coordinator, to discuss our approach and the experience in the spring plans for testing, tracing, training, and some other related topics.
Fantastic. I'll kick things off and I will hand them over to Madison. So the risk assessment group meets every week and communicates very frequently in between. And we really divide our work into 4 big topics. And there are topics you'd expect. So number 1, public health. What is going on in Oregon? We're very lucky to have an excellent health authority at the state level and at the county level. We pay a lot of attention to what's going on there. And of course, now, like every area of the country, unfortunately, we're watching very carefully as cases grow. Second, campus health, and we've got a lot of resources here. Madison will go into some more detail here, but we've got a lot of information about testing. We have a daily health check for those of us who come to campus complete. So we do have some windows into what the health of the campus is, and certainly what the spread of the virus is on campus. Thirdly, personal behavior. This is a virus, as we all know, that really can be defeated quite successfully if we all just do what we're supposed to. Unfortunately, those things are difficult for all of us. We have to wear a mask and we have to keep socially distant. And we have a good way of keeping track of that. We have a survey that we administer every week. So we have some windows into what people are experiencing on campus. And then finally, supplies. Do we have adequate testing materials, masks, gloves, everything we need to be safe on campus? We take all of those into account and assess and report out, as I'm sure all of you have seen with the weekly report that now Madison has been drafting and we've all been reviewing on what's going on. And recently, Madison has made a huge step forward in our communications, which that Craig thinks of as a major part of our work, with a new dashboard that is available on our COVID website. So I'm going to turn things over to Madison and just say we're so delighted that Madison was able to join us. She's added so much to our understanding and ability to manage the disease in this climate. So Madison.
Well, thanks for the introduction, Hugh. And yeah, I'm very happy to be here. You know, I started in this role at about the beginning of this semester and have really overall been very impressed with the pieces that READ has put in place in regards to their COVID response. I'm going to talk about a few of those different things today at kind of a high level. There is more detail available on our website if there's something you are looking to know more about, or feel free to chat or send us an email if you have questions about things in more detail as well. So first and foremost, I want to talk about testing, because this is something that is on the forefront of everybody's mind when it comes to our COVID response. Currently, we are conducting approximately 1,150 tests per week, but we have the capacity to do more than that. On-campus students are being tested twice weekly on either Monday and Thursday or Tuesday and Friday, depending on their schedule. Select faculty, staff, and vendors, especially those who are in high-risk occupations such as our cafeteria workers, our custodial staff, our residents and student life teams who work directly with students or in residence halls, our library staff. Those individuals are being tested weekly. And then we also have a pool of off-campus students who maybe don't live on campus, but who are still accessing campus for work or for classes. We are currently doing a random selection of about 200 of those a week, or about 1/3, who are tested each week. So with using that math, that means a student who lives off campus is being tested about once every 2 to 3 weeks. We plan to continue this moving forward into the spring semester at least the same level, if not more. We are always looking for ways to expand our testing resources. And testing is pretty responsive. We get test results back within about 48 hours, sometimes more quickly than that, which allows us to respond to cases very quickly. Participants are also able to log on to the portal online and see an entire history of their test results. So they really have an understanding of where their status is as soon as we do. So moving on a little bit into our fall experience and what the end of this semester will look like, as well as our plans for the spring. We are working on a little bit of follow-up with our testing. So we know that testing can be complicated and it can change over time as to when somebody can make it in for testing, or maybe something about the process isn't working for them. So we have actually started to do some individual one-on-one follow-up with individuals who have really been struggling to make testing or who have identified challenges with it, so that we can really equitably offer testing to those who need it. Going into next week, which is our last week of on-campus classes and operations for the semester, we will be opening up testing for all students, both those who live on campus and those who live off, so that they can have time to get a test before they then go to travel, go home for holidays or for visits and things like that. Over winter break, we will be limiting the access that individuals have to campus. Students who wanted to continue to have access to campus for a variety of reasons were given the opportunity to apply in partnership with a faculty or staff member to retain that access, like I said, for a variety of reasons, whether that be working on their thesis or working a job over the break. And so those individuals who will be retaining campus access will also be included in continuing surveillance testing on campus, which will be offered twice a week, and we will be asking those individuals who are accessing campus and working with others to test once a week during this time. Looking forward to the spring, we are asking that all students complete a 2-week quarantine prior to returning to on-campus operations. There is some flexibility in where this quarantine happens, whether that is, so if you're an off-campus student and you want to do that at your off-campus read home, you're welcome to do that. Or if you would like to do that in a family home or a different location prior to returning, that is also fine. We just ask that students really during this time limit their interactions with others so that when they come back to campus, we can have a relative bubble of safety, understanding the risks that people have had in this time away. On their return to read, we will be offering pretty elevated testing. At the start of the semester, we will have 4 very long days of testing where individuals will be asked to sign up and will be able to sign up for testing at the start of the semester. And we just ask that individuals, after they test, quarantine until they receive a negative result before starting their on-campus operations. Moving on to another piece of our back to campus plan for the spring. We will be asking all individuals, students, staff, faculty to complete a COVID-19 training. This is similar to what we had asked of individuals before the start of the fall semester, but we are actually updating this training to include some new information that we've gathered over this period of time, as well as some changes that have happened here at Reed in our COVID response. So this training will be sent via email prior to the start of the semester, and we'll have more information about how to complete that training moving forward. One of our other major expectations when it comes to on-campus operations is that of our public health behaviors. So we are all very much aware of the things that we need to do to keep each other safe. That is participating in testing when you're asked to do so. That's masking, social distancing, respecting our visitor restrictions. All of these little things that we have asked individuals to do and have actually included in our student agreements for both on and off-campus students. Our baseline for enforcement of this is, to put it nicely, be kind and remind. We really encourage everybody on campus, students, staff, faculty, affiliates, to just be kind and remind. These are challenging things that we're asking people to do. And many times, seeing somebody who maybe doesn't have a mask on in the moment, an easy reminder to just put that back on is a low level, easy thing that we can do. In situations where maybe a small reminder is not enough, or if we have other more complicated situations, we do have processes in place with different members of student life, as well as peer advisors or peer health promotion advocates who are able to work with others to make sure that we are all creating a safe community and obeying and abiding by these public health behaviors, which are really the cornerstone of our COVID response on campus. The furthest step of this is we do have an enforcement protocol where if there are repeat and problematic behaviors, we do have kind of a tiered approach with which mostly entails conversations with residents and student life about what the barriers are to completing these public health behaviors and how we can improve the situation moving forward. All right, so something else that Hugh touched on in his introduction was our metrics. So as he outlined, we have metrics that kind of fall into these 4 different buckets of public health, campus health, personal behavior, supplies. And a lot of this now, we have been able to roll out a dashboard where we update this weekly or sometimes even more frequently in order for individuals to be able to go online and really see where we're at without having to dig through their email and read through a long narrative. We do still send out a weekly update every Friday, which is where we used to outline these metrics, but really these emails have now become a little more high level and really focused on sharing information about process, campus operations, events, things that are really informative for our day-to-day operations on campus. But like I said, that update is sent out every Friday, as well as the dashboard is updated every Friday. In between, we do have ad hoc updates that we send out via email pretty regularly. So something that is pretty important for everybody involved in operations at Reed is a good connection to your email. And all of our communications that are sent out regarding COVID are posted on our COVID-19 webpage. So one of, I think, the top questions I get is about contact tracing and case investigation on campus. Knocking on wood here, we've been very fortunate this semester. And I think part of it is fortune and part of it is the dedication that our community has shown to being safe. We have had a fairly low number of cases identified so far this year, which is doubly impressive given the high number of testing that we are doing. When we do identify a case in a Reed community member, we partner with the Multnomah County Health Department as well as the Oregon Health Authority to investigate that case to the fullest extent. While Multnomah County is, as our local health jurisdiction, ultimately responsible for that, we feel that we are very important partners and they have agreed because we understand Reed better than anybody who's not a part of that community ever could. So in partnership, we complete an interview with the case, first and foremost, ensuring that they have the support and the healthcare needs that they need to respond to their diagnosis and ensure that they are able to isolate successfully to prevent further exposures. That is also where the contact tracing comes into play. We, during that interview with the case, identify when they were potentially contagious and then identify who they had potential contact with during that time, where they went, who they hung out with. A lot of times there's gray area in that requires us to dig a little bit deeper and have some further conversations. But between myself and our medical director, we have been, kind of spearheading these conversations in order to do a very thorough analysis of who should be identified as a close contact and recommending quarantine when it is appropriate. We do put a lot of thought into our quarantine recommendations, and this is probably one of the most challenging pieces of contact tracing is deciding when and when not to place somebody in quarantine. While we want to be sure that we are protecting our community to the fullest extent, we also recognize the challenge that quarantine can pose, especially on somebody living on campus and trying to have as normal of a student experience as possible. So just know that that is not something that is lost on us, and that is a very integral piece of the conversation when we are making these decisions. The last thing I wanted to touch on here was just a brief introduction to our spring plans. And I think a lot of my other panelists are going to talk about spring plans in more detail, but in regards to our COVID response on campus, we have a lot of plan to continue the model that we have been using successfully this fall. We will be continuing testing at least the same level, if not more next semester. We will be continuing to look at our public health behaviors on campus and where we can improve. And we will continue to support students with a variety of in-class or online formats to support the needs of that community. We are actually planning to expand our support for quarantine, isolation, and contact tracing, including the development of a trained contact tracing team. We will continue to evaluate and update our data collection methods, our indicators, and our metrics as COVID itself changes and as we learn more information about the disease. And with that, it's adapting to changing guidance as well. I think, almost every day we hear something slightly different coming out of one of our health authorities. And that is part of my focus, is really looking at what guidance is coming out where, what is the evidence saying, and how can we implement that to have, the best practices that are also evidence-based on campus. So with that, I will hand it back to Carnell to introduce our next panelist. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Madison and Hugh. So I want to turn to Britt Hoover, who's our Assistant Dean of Students for Student Support, and she has been overseeing READ's Isolation and Quarantine Student Support Program. So I'll just ask that, Britt, if you wouldn't mind sharing how we've been working with our students who have symptoms, who have tested positive, or even have been identified as close contact of a person who's tested positive for COVID-19.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So during the spring 2021 semester, we will continue to operate a holistic and supportive isolation and quarantine program for students. Students who live on campus who are instructed to isolate by the Health and Counseling Center will be temporarily relocated to a designated residence hall on campus, where they will receive ongoing personal and academic support, as well as ongoing regular consultation with a member of the Health and Counseling Center's medical team. Students who live off campus should plan to isolate in their off-campus residence. Students who are instructed to quarantine due to potential exposure, quarantine in their current room assignment. So that either again is in their current residence hall room, or if they live off campus, in their private residence off campus. But they too are provided active support during their time in quarantine. Students in isolation and quarantine in the residence halls receive meal delivery through Bon Appetit in our wellness meal delivery program. That's been going really well this semester and will continue in spring. And as you can expect, students in isolation or quarantine, they're unable to attend in-person classes, work, meetings, or social gatherings until they're formally cleared to do so by the HCC. But students who feel well enough can continue classes or work remotely. Faculty have been supremely supportive in helping students in isolation or quarantine participate in in-person classes virtually, and we expect that will continue through the spring. For non-COVID concerns and challenges, I just briefly want to make mention the READ Care Team continues to provide proactive support and guidance to students. Students, faculty, staff, and family members can refer a student to the READ Care Team by filling out an online care referral form or by emailing the care team at careteam@read.edu. I'll drop that information in the chat.
All right, thank you, Britt. So next up, we're going to focus a little bit. We're going to kind of change topics a bit and talk about the academic program, supporting the experience. And so I'm going to have Nora, who serves as our registrar, to focus a little bit on the academic program, the calendar and experience, and also talk a little bit about deadlines associated with that. And you're still muted. There we go.
That's such a tricky move. All right, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. I'm happy to talk about what's happening in preparation for spring, finishing up the fall. This week, students have been encouraged to meet with their academic advisor and to talk about their spring schedule. Most of our students register for the full year, either the continuing students last April or the first year students who did that once they came to campus, or I mean, over the summer, actually. On Monday, the 16th, they'll have the opportunity to change that program, update it, depending on how they're doing in this semester, and some of our courses have changed times and we've added sections and that sort of thing. So beginning next week, students will be able to update their spring registration and have a sense of what spring will look like. First year students will be meeting with their advisors either via email or on Zoom to check in, get their solar pin. We ask that students meet with their advisor before they change their registration so they can get advice from their faculty advisor. In spring, much the same as in fall, we will have a variety of formats for our courses. And those include in-person courses, in-person with remote access. So we call those hybrid. So some of the students are in the room, some of the students are in their own rooms. We have online only, and we have online courses with an optional in-person opportunity. So some of our theater courses, for example, are mostly online, but they might gather a small number of students to do something in person, socially distanced. In spring, the ratio is a little bit higher on the online side. one of the things we want to make absolutely sure is that students can take the courses they need to progress toward graduation. So if a course is only being offered this spring and a student is going to need that to move forward toward graduation, typically we'll have an online version of that available. So the departments have been thinking through that very carefully. So that is what we're talking about for spring. In terms of, and the academic calendar is now up to date on Reed's website. In spring, as we are doing this fall, the break is very late in the term. So in fall, it is the week of Thanksgiving. So one of the nice aspects of having a late fall break is that our students get to be home that entire Thanksgiving week, which isn't typical for our students. So, and I think some of our faculty and even staff are pleased that they can actually prepare for Thanksgiving, even if it'll be smaller this year. In spring, again, we will move spring break late into the semester so that students will not be going back and forth. And that calendar is up on the website. It was announced in the spring announcement. And I'm trying to think. So yeah, the last day of classes, all of this is on the calendar, but the last day of classes here on campus is going to be the 20th of November, and then classes will resume on the 30th of November, but online. The last day of classes for fall is Monday the 7th, so we were able to move that up a little bit. Final exams end on the 15th. So that's how we will wrap up the fall. Spring, we will come back as originally planned on January 25th. And then, as I mentioned, spring break will be late. Seniors will, for the most part, be able to stay around if that's what they wish to do. And we will have, but other students will leave campus by April 11th. So those are posted. The schedule of classes for the spring is up and updated. The departments went through and checked what they could do and made smaller classes again and added sections. Students can search based on available spots in those classes, but that begins on Monday, and that gives us plenty of time to respond and try to adjust to make sure everybody gets in a full load of classes that allows them to progress toward the degree. So that's the academic piece in terms of the calendar and registration and moving forward. Send it back to Carnell.
Awesome, thank you, Nora. I'm going to have Julie talk a little bit about some of the academic support elements. And so as Julie articulated, she oversees the academic support, disability and accessibility resources and international student services. So can you share a little bit about how these offices are supporting students given the academic program?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with international students. As you may or may not know, we have students attending Reed remotely right now, including from other countries with time zone challenges and all kinds of other challenges. And so Gwen, the program director in International Student Services, is using survey-informed information about how our students are doing in other countries or here in order to beef up programming, add new hours, provide different kinds of things. A small example of that is we have a mentorship program for first-year students that typically only takes place in the fall. We're going to continue that for folks who want to continue having an upper class mentor through the spring semester. So trying to be responsive and thoughtful about how to support those folks and welcoming as many as possible, as many who can get here for the spring. We'll be doing another little mini reorientation for folks that have been attending Reed but not physically yet. So hopefully we'll bring them into the fold as soon as we can. Academic support and disability and accessibility resources have been providing both sort of general and in the case of DAR, specialized support to students as they navigate new academic waters. So this whole thing is new for all of us. It can be differently distracting compared to in-person work, and students with all kinds of different learning styles, chronic health conditions, mental health conditions are experiencing this time in different sorts of ways. So we're providing a lot of individual coaching support to students who want help thinking through, how do I set up my workday? How do I set up my workspace? How do I sort of approach this on a day-to-day level when it's harder to find friends to study with and that sort of thing in the new environment. So we're helping folks come up with creative solutions there. We moved all the tutoring online. We've got workshops and drop-in hours with staff available online. And then DAR has also gotten creative and responsive to the things that students might need in a different environment. So breaks from screen time, for example, are a thing that that might be an appropriate accommodation for many of us, and for sure for students that have vision, headache, migraine-related stuff going on. So, so lots of creative work, trying to keep up with what students need. I think the stress of the times has for sure exacerbated a lot of folks' chronic health conditions or other disabilities, and we're here to respond as needs change. So I think that's good for me for now.
Awesome. Thank you, Julie. So I wanted to turn a little bit to Dana now. And as we know, remote learning is a new experience for many of us. And our students are coming to Reed for this academic experience. Our educational program being that it's small, in person, with our full-time faculty. And as Nora articulated, we've had to shift things. And so I would love to hear and have Dana share her experience teaching remotely.
Thank you, Cornell. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Dana Katz, and I'm an art historian. And I've been at Reed for 16 years. And this year, I've been teaching remotely for all my classes. And in many ways, I've recreated my Reed pedagogy on Zoom. So given the circumstances, I think that the experience has been overwhelmingly positive. I teach synchronously, that is, I teach at the same time and for the same duration as my usual classroom teaching. And this is an important detail. Students still receive the one-on-one experience in the Zoom classroom that they would in a conventional classroom. So I may not be able to walk around the large conference table in my classroom as I usually would, but I could read the room by seeing the reactions to my questions and foster discussion and call on them accordingly. To create a dynamic conversation in the classroom, I typically ask one or two students to start the discussion with an image of their choice that relates to a concept from our readings. I then break the students into smaller groups to discuss the student presenters' ideas. And I've always done this exercise to develop the students' visual acuity, but because I want to promote close looking at images and the text that we study. And I have to say that Zoom accommodates this exercise beautifully. So for an example, in my upper division class, which I call Renaissance Space, we were studying the Italian Renaissance piazza using spatial theories from a French scholar named Michel de Certeau. And the student presenters began class with images of the Black Lives Matter street murals that you'll see in Washington, D.C. and San Francisco. And now you'll see that they've spread throughout cities throughout the United States. And they wanted us, the class, to compare and contrast how the 14th century piazza and the contemporary DC street murals create community and forge contestation, how the boundaries of space order and disorder the city. And that afternoon, we discussed the student questions first in smaller groups. So I use Zoom's breakout room option to give students time to discuss the comparison. In our regular classroom, students usually turn to the student right next to them for this exercise. However, Zoom randomly selects partners so that students were always talking to new people. And ironically, being online has further promoted a kind of classroom camaraderie. Students are regularly and rigorously thinking through these theories with new classmates. And that morning, the student presenters engaged the class in a conversation that treated the politicized space of the Renaissance streetscape, as well as present-day issues related to our own contested geographies. And the class that day was electric, and it was fueled by the provocative comparison that the students themselves conceived on Zoom. And I truly couldn't ask for more. Now, Zoom has also made office hours, interestingly enough, even more convenient. Many of my colleagues have noted, as well as I've noted, that there's been an uptake in the number of students in our office hours. And in large part, it's because students can now multitask. My colleagues told me that they have students coming to office hours while they're at work or while they're going on a walk. So students from Hong Kong, Texas, and Salem, Oregon have attended my office hours. And I think that Zoom has even made students a bit more organized. Zoom links to Google Calendar, where they store not only all their Zoom links, but also all their assignments. We're also able now to have more guest speakers in our classroom, which is very interesting. So given that my colleagues at other universities are also working from home, we now have the time and the budget to give more lectures. So for example, I've already scheduled 2 speakers to talk about their new unpublished work for my spring classes. And I too am scheduled to give lectures at the Sorbonne and the University of Southern California in the spring. Everyone around the globe is getting creative on Zoom. And that creativity is fueled in large part by technology. And I'm grateful for Reed for providing me the technology I need, and more importantly, for teaching me how to use it to be successful in the classroom. So not only do I have this computer I'm talking on, but I also have a special microphone. I've acquired an iPad with new apps that allowed me to grade papers the way I'm used to grading papers, but now all digitally. And although I look forward to walking around my large conference table in my classroom, and I know my students too are looking forward to returning to regular life, until then, we're fortunate to have the technology to teach remotely that allows us to create a dynamic learning environment, even in the digital world. Back to you, Karnal.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You know, it's so funny when you say multitasking. I'm like, can we truly multitask? So I want to turn our time now to think about student and campus life during COVID. And we know perhaps one of the most challenging pieces of this is the impact of the public health behaviors and the practices on students living and accessing campus. We know that masks are required indoors. You know, the 6 feet physical distance must be maintained, and all of our events and gatherings have attendance limits. And so I'd like Amy to talk a little bit about the residential plans and the deadlines for the fall and spring, while also sharing some examples of fall activities and what we can expect for the spring. So Amy.
Sure, I'm happy to. I'll also try to grab some of the questions that have come in as well. So I think one of the big things to note is that campus life looks different this year. We are not necessarily holding programs in the same way in which we used to. And that has allowed for a lot of opportunities. I think definitely, as Dana was talking about, for students to access the things that we're doing in different ways. And I can tell you, I was very nervous. I was like, what do we do without this? You know, this standard pizza party or this other kind of gathering on the quad. And I've been really impressed at the way our students have adapted, and our faculty and staff as well. Just this past week, we had an election watch event, and we had no idea what to expect. And we had probably about 200 students come through a space spread out, don't worry, over a span of several hours, all following safety guidelines, but also just so happy to see each other. So I think it's been really interesting to think about different ways in which we can kind of pivot and still provide those connection opportunities for students. To give a little bit of, we're about a week and a half away from many of our students heading home for the remainder of fall semester. So our residence halls and houses and apartments close November 22nd. Students were able to apply to stay for the end of the semester and for winter if they needed to do so. For students that will be here over winter break, we will be providing winter programming and food services and other things for them, as we recognize some of these students have not actually been able to go home or even necessarily leave Reed in almost a year now. So many of the questions we've gotten are about spring semester and coming back. As was covered in the spring announcements, we will have students coming back kind of in kind of scheduled waves in which we did for fall semester. So our arrival dates are January 14th, 15th, 20th, and 21st, and we'll be testing on those days from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. And for those of you who have students or live on campus, or are a student who lives on campus, we'll be sending out the sign up for that by November 16th, which I believe is Monday, because we know very many people are very interested in making their travel plans to come back. As Madison shared earlier, students will be tested upon arrival, as we think it is very important for that to happen. And then we'll be asking them to quarantine in their rooms until they get a test result. I can say most of the test results have been coming back within 24 and 48 hours. And we're using the same testing company for the beginning of fall or spring semester, which so students will be very used to that procedure as well. So we're not expecting or anticipating the delays that we had in the fall semester. Our capacity will look pretty similar for spring semester. We will still, our maximum capacity is 820 students, which is a reduced density, and students will still be living in single rooms. We do have some availability for students to move on to campus in the spring, as I know we have some students who are studying remotely right now that are interested in moving on campus. So there's an interest form on the Residence Life website that students will be able to fill out. Just some highlights of fall semester and things we're looking forward to of the spring. A few people have asked questions about Paideia. Paideia is one of those Reed traditions in which faculty, staff, alumni, students can teach classes, anything from computer coding to, I know the Center for Life Beyond Reed teaches kind of like how to find your purpose or cultivating your purpose and other fun things as well. And I'm really pleased to share that our students are kind of leading the transition to offering all of those course offerings online. So that will be a virtual experience this upcoming spring. So students will be able to kind of participate, whether they stay home or elsewhere a little bit longer, or if they're back on campus already. We also expect to be able to provide a wide array of programming for spring semester. We recognize students have different comfort levels, so we'll continue to offer some virtual programming or what we call grab and go program, where students go pick up art supplies or even pumpkins to carve or things like that. And then we hope to be able to continue to utilize the tents on campus and do some other kind of spread out activities outside. And I think there was one more question about how are spring fall seniors being celebrated this year. So as many of you know, there's typically a big celebration for our seniors, and that is often a little bit smaller fall semester because less people are graduating in that time. And it's been really great to see our student czars, or our students that are planning Ren Fair, really try to figure out how to recognize their peers who have this huge accomplishment. So they're currently exploring ways how to do things virtually, whether it's burning their thesis over a Zoom call or figuring out ways in which there can be some very distant celebrations. So if you have a senior, stay tuned for more information regarding that.
Thank you, Amy. So, you know, with the start of the spring term is probably about 2 months away. I'm sure it's hard to imagine the end of spring 2021 and many plans for continuing to celebrate the class of 2021. Hugh, can you share any information about what will guide the college's planning for commencement or related activities?
Absolutely. We would love to have commencement in person. It is Reed does just a fantastic job with commencement. It is focused on the graduates. So we would love to do that. We were not able to do that last year. At this time, the state restrictions would not allow us to have commencement in the format that you are used to and we are used to, where we gather families and students together. We are trying to imagine how we could have an in-person ceremony for the students, at least, that would be that might say divide up departments and we move them through individually. We are going to, the first limiter here is simply going to be what the state allows in terms of gathering size. And I'm very concerned, you know, very candidly, that they're not going to permit us to have that kind of gathering. The other problem, of course, these things change rapidly, and many of us want to make plans for these kinds of events months in advance. That is going to be very difficult for us. So I would say at this point, I want you to know we're working to make this happen. We are going to be guided as the first principle by the state, and of course, immediately behind that, health and safety, and we will let you know. But I think, unfortunately, it is probably unlikely, unless something dramatic happens in the vaccine world, that families will be able to come back to campus to celebrate graduation with their students. And as a parent of a college student, I know how heartbreaking that is. So.
Thank you, Hugh. It's probably hard to imagine summer already. So we're going to imagine summer right now for just a second. And so I want to turn to Alice, who's the director for the Center for Life Beyond Read. And for students think about their academic career, you know, at Read is like 4 academic coursework, 4 semesters of academic coursework, 3 periods of like deep investment into their own growth and skills, which happens during the summer. And so, Alice, I would love for you to share a little bit more of how you and your team are continuing and helping also our graduating students make the most of this coming summer. Whether it's with the pandemic or without it. So.
Right. Thank you, Carnell, and hello, parents and families. Like everybody on this panel, my team and I feel very fortunate to work with your brilliant, resilient students. And like Dana, we have discovered that virtual advising brings us closer to students and allows us to be really creative in creating even global connections. So if I cover, I'm going to go very quickly, and if I cover anything you want more detail on, you can always reach me at beyondread@read.edu, and everything that I mentioned will be at read.edu/beyond-read. So if somebody could maybe put that in the chat. So planning's the first thing I want to just mention. We help your student, exactly what Carnell said, think about their college education as including a plan for 3 summers and 4 winter breaks. And in order to successfully launch from Read, and their summer plan can include a structured activity like a paid internship or a job or research work, or self-initiated like developing an app, putting on a play, starting a company, augmenting their education through Coursera. And because we integrate careers in graduate school, professional schools like pre-law, pre-med, and MBA, and national fellowships planning, this allows us to introduce your students to ideas that they may not have considered for their summer. And when they return from their summer, we help them craft their narrative and start planning again for the next segment. So the opportunities that we explore with them, that's the second thing I wanted to cover, is we don't start with students with what is it you want to do. And we're also very major agnostic. Your student starts his or her planning with us by identifying what lights them up. What issues and ideas do they care about in a framework that we call communities of purpose. And starting as early as their first year, your student will have one specialized advisor, trained to help them plan to explore their purpose. For example, if your student's interested in sustainable life on Earth, or the care and cure of illness, or arts and expression, or any one of the 9 communities we advise in, we help them see the opportunities to develop skills through campus jobs, shadows, community engagement, informational interviews, internships, research, graduate school, professional school, national fellowships, employer, and alumni connections. And these are all available to them. And our work is to try to connect the dots for them, not make more dots, and help them see a pathway. So the resources that we have that we support them for their summer exploration really starts now, both for winter break and for summer. So they have access to one-on-one professional advising. They can access any of us, but they have primarily one that we can work with them all 4 years. First year students work with peer career advisors predominantly. We do employer events like our ones last night. We ran a virtual career fair with 29 employers. They have access to hundreds of paid internships through the 3 curated databases that we manage: Handshake, has more than 1,000 employers that are interested in recruiting Readies. We also pay for Vault and Going Global. All of those are on our website. The Summer Internship Award in March is one that is given for students to explore in traditionally unpaid nonprofit summer internships. The Career Advancement Fund is year-round, up to $500 for students to do professional exploration, like a virtual conference. There's a search tool to help them find the funding for their fellowships, and we signed it Find and Fund Your Dreams, is what we tell them. And finally, students hear about all this through their advisor or in Handshake. 87% of the student body has logged into Handshake. The events are promoted there. So we're very active on social media, a weekly newsletter, and direct emails. So it's hard to miss us. I do just want to say we love working with them, and I do want to put in a plug for our Burn Your Draft podcast, where we help seniors learn to talk about their thesis experience so that they can talk about it with the world outside, and it's wherever you get your podcasts. So thank you again for sending us your great students.
Alice, before you get off, I have a question for you that came through,
Yeah.
and that you could probably answer. It's one of the attendees asked about their son is a first-year student and wants to do an internship next summer. Is it possible for him to, as a student coming out of his first year, to do that, or is that usually for older students?
Yeah, it's possible for a first-year student. It is more complicated, and that's why I would encourage a first-year student to apply for Summer Internship Award so that we can help them with funding to actually go find an internship at whatever space they're interested in, with public radio or whatever. But first-year students can win the Summer Internship Award, which is a really good way to go.
And then to follow up on that, how often do you recommend seniors meet with the CLBR advisor starting typically in the fall?
We have an expression that we meet students where they are, and it depends. Some first year students are ready to go, and some seniors want to wait till May. I think my advice would be, depending on what it is they're attempting to do, we meet with some students weekly to get them ready. For example, right now we're getting students their graduate school applications ready by December 1st. We meet with many of them weekly. Others drop into what we call our senior boot camp. We just ran it every night last week. And they come in and get a polished resume, polished cover letter, LinkedIn profile, couple of leads, and then that kind of is what they need to do to jumpstart their approach. So I don't think there's a direct answer to that, but we are as open to as many meetings as they need to help them launch successfully. Oh, by the way, we also work with them after they graduate in their first year post-read.
Awesome, thank you. Another handful of questions that were still coming through, and I know some of the questions were centered around how do you get access to the weekly report. We post that the weekly report on the COVID website. So, and again, it is posted on Fridays, every Friday. So that's a great place to just stay up to date. It's where the dashboard is. There's tons of information there that I think will help kind of get a sense of what our weekly operations look like. There are a few more questions that were related to kind of social interactions. And so, Amy, this may be you and Britt and Julie, it may be a few folks. So we know that this semester has been hard for some of our students, especially our first year students, due to whether it's quarantining, social distancing, virtual classes. And some folks think that, that may lead to a fear of leading to social isolation or detachment or depression. And so it's getting colder here. The days are getting, well, I was going to say shorter, but it's dark outside right now here. And so what do you suggest for our parents and for our students as it relates to improving their social interactions, especially in the residence halls, or just, again, abilities for them to just, again, be connected and kind of overcome this season that we're going into?
Sure, I think that's a great question, and one we're hearing a lot right now. I mean, I think transitioning and adjusting to college is hard to begin with, and then you put it in the middle of a pandemic, and it is even more challenging. I think to to give a little bit of advice, one of the things that I have found really helpful when talking to students is to really normalize it, that most people are feeling very isolated right now, and really talk to them about what their interests are. Our student house advisors live within the residence hall and are really well trained in knowing the different opportunities at Reed and really knowing the different ways in which students can get connected, whether it is through programs that International Student Services is putting on for the Lunar New Year, or perhaps it's a student is interested in a particular type of physical activity that maybe perhaps could be a PE credit or something that is offered at Reed. I think our HAs can really help point students in a direction that they could really connect with students. I think we're also really trying to provide opportunities for students to engage in different ways, and that there's a lot of virtual and we're trying to do in person. One of the things we've really heard a lot from students is they want more in-person opportunities. So we've really looked at ways in which to utilize our tents, and they're awesome. They have walls and heaters and things like that, and how we can put more kind of activities on in the spring that really allow students to socialize more. One of my colleagues says the happiest they saw students this semester was on a Sunday afternoon roller skating in a parking lot, because we brought the Rose City Rollers in to offer a program, or a student doing an archery game, knocking over kind of some bottles and winning carnival games. Really just looking for kind of those simple opportunities for students just to have some laughs and just to connect with each other, because we recognize that things can be really heavy. And I think I'm going to turn it a little bit over to Britt, to talk a little bit about kind of resources that we offer for students who are kind of experiencing depression, and things that we can connect students to as well through care team and others.
Thanks, Amy. So we know that this year and this situation is affecting students in lots of different ways. And as always, mental health and well-being is critically important to our campus community. I just want to briefly mention the resources of the Health and Counseling Center. They're colleagues of mine. I don't directly work in this department, but they should be known and praised by the Reed community for their work this year. The Health and Counseling Center offers counseling services to students, so individualized counseling, but also peer workshops where peers can come together to talk about common issues such as coping skills during a transition, managing stress, etc. The HEC also, of course, is a medical clinic that includes medical care, nurses for acute care and college health needs, not just COVID, but a lot of things. And that's a great place for students to be referred to if, like Amy mentioned, specifically they're experiencing some mental health issues, they're feeling depressed, and they need maybe some places to like process and debrief their experience. I often think that the peer groups in particular are a great place to send students, to Amy's point, to just normalize some of this, that some of this really is the transition to college, and this has been an extra challenging transition, and we know that. But the more I think students hear from one another that they are not alone in this, the more that they actually feel comfortable participating and reaching out and joining activities. So I would just plug the HEC, although mental health comes from a variety of places, recreation, exercise through like the sports center, time with friends and attending those events, levity and joy, having career direction. So we're all playing a part in student mental health and well-being, but certainly when it comes to greater concerns, please do feel welcome to reach out to the care team or refer a student to the Health and Counseling Center.
Thank you, Britt. So we have come to the end of our hour, and I know that we have been answering questions on the back end, so you probably are not seeing all the questions that are coming through, but we do want to say thank you for spending some time with us tonight. Please know that we will be doing another session again, and so if you have more questions and you're not able to make the next one, please know that you can email us at student-life@reed.edu. We'll make sure that goes into the chat, so you'll be able to see that. And I'm sure as questions come up, please do not hesitate to let us know. A big thank you to all of our panelists this evening as well. So thank you all for participating and sharing your knowledge and wisdom. And again, we hope you have a wonderful evening.